I confess it was Marissa's participation in this that led me to think I gotta get on board with this because I'm a huge fan. So Marissa, glad to do this with you. But yeah, I lead the global research and insights team for MillerKnoll. So we're a collection of design focused brands that include Herman Miller and Knoll, but also a bunch of other furniture brands and textile brands that you might know. And yeah, I have a great job. Our team is focused on understanding future of work, future of homes, future of higher education environments, et cetera. Much of my time these days is spent focused on helping organizations to rethink their approach to workplace. We generally take an approach that we support work wherever it wants to happen. We're pretty democratized in terms of thinking about what people really want. So many of our customers are actually remote first. Others are very office centric. And now a majority have landed somewhere in between with hybrid, although many of them aren't exactly sure how to define it. I also have the privilege of being our point person for a group called Future Forum. So we co-founded a group focused on the future of work with Slack, Boston Consulting Group, and a group called MLT, focused on inclusive management, and have a tremendous body of data and insights related to how work is changing. The piece that Jin mentioned, yeah, I just got done sharing this through Work Design Magazine last week. We share a lot of research, but this was just a little bit of a perspective. And it was a little bit of a gut check in terms of how we should understand changes to the physical work environment. And it boiled down to this kind of foundational understanding that really for the first time since the inception of the office in the late 1800s, it's becoming what the employees want it to be. I mean, that's like the simplest way I can frame it. And in some cases, it's going to be very work from home centric, with office spaces feeling like a more purposeful hub for belonging and community building. In other cases, I happen to be with a very large apparel company this morning that has a lot of they have a lot of clothing that they work on throughout the day. It's very artifact based, like they need studio space. But this is just really different. Like, I won't bore you with the history of the office, but just know that it started with bosses, or they were even called managers at the time, creating spaces adjacent to their stores or their manufacturing facilities, overseeing clerks in these starched white collars. It's where we get the term white collar work. And the bosses sat in big offices, and the clerks sat in rows of open desks. And I got to tell you, it hasn't really changed that much in those years. It was still very much conceptualized as what the bosses or the leaders of the organization need. But now, with organizations spending, like pre-pandemic, about $10,000 per person per year on office space, that was the average in North America, people are just saying there's no point in having the space unless it really works for the employees. And so some of what I do is help people that run facilities or corporate real estate teams or workplace experience teams think of their spaces more like a product, and think of their end users more like customers or consumers, which is why the restaurant analogy is one that I started using probably late 2020, where we started to get more and more organizations say, well, we've been working from home for 6 months in the pandemic. Do you think we'll ever have offices again? And my response was, well, you've probably been cooking pretty well from home. Do you not want to go to a restaurant again? And people would smile and say, well, I love going to a restaurant. And I'd say, but you don't love going to the office? Like, there's clearly a disconnect here. And so just like a restaurateur has to understand their consumers, understand the unique value that they're offering, contextualize it to the local culture and community that they're serving, they need to understand their competition, they need to respect their customers' time. That's like the foundation for great workplace design. And there are some really exciting examples. I happen to host our podcast called Looking Forward. We had on head of dynamic work at Okta a couple of weeks ago. They're 4 or 5 years into their hybrid journey. They told their employees they don't ever have to come to the office, but they're expanding their number of office locations because they ditched the traditional assumptions about what an office should be and created something that their employees love. So for somebody that's not very patient with the status quo, this is a fun time. At least that's how I'd categorize myself. And through all of this, I had the pleasure of meeting many people on LinkedIn and elsewhere, but Marissa and her work at Cushman I've been a fan, to the point where I even asked Marissa to speak to a broad group of internal employees at MillerKnoll just about what she's seeing in the world, because she sits in a unique vantage point and has a creative artistry that I've grown to love.
Amazing segue to Marissa. Marissa, workplace strategy director at Cushman, also an artist and an author, and just like such an advocate for getting all of us to be our true selves, bringing our whole selves to work. Marissa, you want to do your quick talk and intro, and then we can just discuss together?
Yeah, thanks. Or I didn't know if Elkanah Reed had a question. Did you want to get that first, or just want to be mindful? I can go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, forgive me. I totally missed looking at the chat. So you'll give me a chance to read it.
No. It's all good, Marissa. If you want to go first, I can get my question in later because I want you to continue to flow. But I saved it. I got it.
All right, let's flow. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the kind words. That was so nice, Ryan. He's somebody that I met through the magic of LinkedIn and technology, which honestly is what is so fascinating to me about how is technology driving connections. We're all working together. We are having a virtual water cooler. I'm actually in the office. I'm in Miami. So it's fascinating how it's all going together. So to summarize what I do for workplace strategy is I might have my own opinions about what I like, but I'm here to help my clients figure out what are your needs? What does the company need? What is your culture? What are the values? How do people work? How do different people work within your organization? HR and finance have different functions than marketing and product development, right? A startup versus an enterprise company is completely different. So I help them to create solutions to figure out how much space do we need? When do we come in? What does that look like? What types of spaces do we need? And also, I really want to focus on that people component. How do we communicate the change? I have my change management certification. I feel like I was doing that before. Just to give some quick background, I spent a lot of my background sitting with the clients, helping them transition through changes. Pharma, big campuses, and broadcast television. They all had similarities and differences, but it's fascinating to see at the end of the day, people want to feel included. They want to understand why they're there. They want some flexibility and autonomy. And I think that's the things that like we're all feeling that today, whether you're at home, whether you're in the office or a hybrid, we still do want to connect and have that sense of belonging. So how do we create that in the workplace, in hybrid, in the middle, whatever. But I'm trying to think like the things I wanted to focus on. I just wanted to mention, like, I don't think there's one right size fits all, but how do we find the right fit for the client as a consultant? That's what I want to do. What are the options? What are the risks and benefits? And can we come up with some creative solutions and have fun while we're doing that? Because that's personally fulfilling to me. Agree with Ryan on the curated experience. Like I would love, my husband said, if we win the lottery, I want a personal chef. I'm there for that. You know, we can't figure out what to cook each night for dinner, but I'm taking some classes through Cushman at Cornell on hospitality. So I'm excited that starts tomorrow. Like, you know, what can we gain from hospitality? I think we've talked about airport lounges together, Ryan, kindergarten classes, whatever that is. Let me see. And how are we, one thing I'm frustrated right now is like, we see all these sound bites in the news. I want to go and listen to I think it's an hour and a half, the Malcolm Gladwell interview that was trending yesterday, because I want to listen. I want to see what he said in the whole context before I come to any judgment. But I think that we're seeing all these sound bites and it's either we're in the office or we're not. And I keep thinking before the pandemic, a lot of people, it was more normalized, right? We were working from home, maybe 1 to 2 days a week, or people were remote. Now it's just, everybody has that access. It's more equitable. And I think it's an interesting conversation. I don't think it's this or that, it's this and. So how do we, it does feel very binary in the media, Brandon, 100%. You know, and frankly, I'm bored with that conversation. So how do we move forward? How do we come up with better solutions? It's like everybody's arguing about the horse and we're now to the cars. Like that's what that feels like. Well, how do we rethink what the future of work is? And that's why I love the work you guys do with Future Forum and Slack and like meeting everybody from different industries. So we can think, well, what doesn't exist that we would want? What can be better versus let's go back to how things were, you know? And also it's been a rough 2 years, social justice, SCOTUS recently, like there's a lot of issues that are coming through, elections. So I don't think it's just our wellness is COVID. It's not that our wellness is low because we're not in the office together. It's been like we've all got our butts kicked for the past 2.5 years. So anyway, that's what I'm here to say, and happy to be part of the conversation. I hope that.
I'm going to jump in with a really quick poll while everyone kind of processes all of that. One of the first things that Marissa had told me was mandates don't work, So I created this little poll for, it's for yourself, for your company. Some of us here are startup founders with a really small team, but what is like this, if mandates don't work, that also is a blanket statement, but like, what's the in between? What's that hybrid where maybe some things can be mandated, maybe some things should be purely like employee choice, versus some things maybe a manager and a team can like work out on their own based on how distributed that team is. And there are some teams that are like 100% in one city versus the opposite, totally distributed. So that was my question for you, Marissa. It's like, how should the CEO determine like how much should be mandated versus not?
I mean, I think, and I'm open to hearing other opinions. It's more, I think, there's results we're seeing are mandates. What will happen is, what is it that you want the goal to be? Do you want people to come in 3 days a week? If that's what the goal is, then find a way to include people in management and teams, but also give them a little bit of flexibility and autonomy so that they can say, hey, our goal is that we bring everybody together, and this is why. This is why this is important. And then with teams, with management, with support from the top down, how do we get everybody on the same page? How do we account for it if there's outliers, if there's things that, somebody has an accommodation that they need to be? Okay, as long as that's communicated and you have that rules. But from what we're seeing is that will make your engagement and your happiness from the employees higher than if you just say, well, we want you in 3 days a week and this is why, because I said so. Like if you tell your kid to do something, they immediately say, I don't want to do that. But if you show them why it's important and how it benefits them, I think it's just messaging. But what's the common goal? That's my thought.
I'll just share that the future form data supports everything you just said. And there's a psychological theory called reactance theory, which basically says that if you tell someone that they have to do something and they perceive it as a loss of autonomy, you can expect them to do the opposite. Mandates in general, that's not exactly a great term, right? We've had a few mandates blow up in our faces recently, but one of the things that I think I'm seeing most success with is organizations that pivot from mandates and control to just like actually asking the employees to step up and invest in one another. And I'll tell you what we did. We basically sent a communication to our employees saying, hey, we respect your autonomy, your flexibility, but we also need your help. We have new employees. We have employees that are feeling socially isolated, that need better networks. We'd ask that you please invest the equivalent of a couple days a week in spending time with others. And this was the caveat, you have full permission to proactively block your calendars without video calls or other meetings during times of connection. Because this is anecdotally the number one thing I hear from end users that we interview, which is even if their employer's given them great autonomy and flexibility, if you have 7 hours of video meetings or 6 hours of video meetings, you're going to make a commute to go and sit in front of a laptop with very little break in between. Maybe you get to use the bathroom, wave to Marissa if she goes by. The inflexibility of our schedules is actually one of the biggest hindrances to office occupancy. And if we look at the last quarterly Future Forum data where we interviewed 10,000 people, 80% wanted more flexibility with where they could work, but 94 wanted more flexibility with when. So it's the schedule and flexibility that's gotten so many people bogged down. The office can sometimes get caught in the crossfire, but I think if you give people the chance to actually like spend quality time with each other, most will take it.
That's a good point. I agree 100%.
I'm going to jump in with that, the poll data that we just collected here. So the the winner is 40% of the people said each person can decide. This was to our question, has your company given a mandate for remote hybrid work and how much wiggle room do you have? So 40% of people here said each person can decide. A third says some mandates plus each team and some personal decisions. And then 13% said same umbrella mandate for all, and 13% said each team or manager department can decide. So I think it's
And
actually a fairly positive that there is actually a lot of, personal decision making.
I think so. And it's also, I mean, I think there's going to be, like, for a huge company with 100,000 people, that's going to be different than a company with 50 people, right? Or a law firm. And I think you have to keep it, like, how do you communicate that and figure out, maybe you have to do a whole change management program or something to figure out, like, you have your HR person, you have your finance, you have the different people in the room saying, what do we need? What's happening? How are we measuring the innovation and productivity? That's what I was talking with some colleagues today. What is happening? What work is best done in office and what isn't? Or maybe we're thinking about it wrong. Why is it 3 days a week? Why isn't it that the finance team books a workspace, they have a dedicated storage room, and they come in the last week every month, but then another team has it the beginning of a month because they're working on some ideation and they're going to invest in 3 days of in-house conferencing for training. I mean, what is it that we're not doing that could be forward thinking? That's what I'm thinking about.
Sydney, I had a question. How do you manage this within a distributed organization? How do you track? Ryan, I know in the Future Forum, one of the takeaways was like technology is a major boost, that employees that feel like their company is investing in like innovative technology to help with remote hybrid work, that results in, more satisfied employees, like less, higher retention, less turnover. I would love to know from everyone here, feel free to jump in, what are some, for a fully distributed team, what are some of the tools and software that has really helped?
I'll just jump in really quick just to kind of pinpoint my question a little bit more. So I work for a company around 350 employees. We have around 150 in New York. I'm the workplace experience manager. And so I joined about a year ago. We didn't have a space. I built out a 2-floor space, designed it, made it make sense, made it a ton of conference rooms, kind of focusing on collaborative spaces. And now the biggest challenge is because what we had created and had continued with was like a remote first idea of what people should be doing and how they should come into work, kind of like giving them the autonomy to do so. But we have new leadership in who is very adamant about, we want faces, we want people in. At least 2 days a week was kind of mentioned in a recent all hands, but without a real plan. So I'm kind of sitting here like, okay, how do I make this happen? Especially when I have people hired all over the country. And so do I focus on obviously I focus on the New Yorkers, but what would you recommend? And truthfully, we don't have the resources right now to really invest in anything that expensive in terms of technology. Really, we don't have anything. So I'm trying to think creatively in terms of what I could do. Thank you.
I will let others jump in, but open offer to have a deeper side conversation, just because we should help our leaders know that the office occupancy trends that we see in North America are affected by a lot of things, including commute time, lack of available childcare, overscheduled video meetings. There's like a series of things that you can begin to pick at, but it's going to be something that others like HR and IT ideally help to support. So don't feel like you're in this alone. And I will say in New York and San Francisco and other cities if you look at the office occupancy rates, there's no doubt that it's a bigger challenge than in Toledo, Ohio, or Paris, or any place where you can get to the office a lot quicker.
Marissa, do you have any thoughts on that? And I'm happy to connect you offline after. I love to hear people's thoughts. Go ahead, Marissa.
Oh, yeah. And I'd be happy to join in a conversation too, with anybody. I feel like part of our job is just talking to people to build relationships. I would say maybe, okay, can you solve for the person who was hired in LA? I'm bringing my occupancy planning. What can you do now? Are there people who are already coming into the office? Maybe you can encourage them to say, hey, can we get lunch together? I just had lunch with my coworkers today. She bought for me and I was surprised. Like, you didn't have to do that, but we had a nice time. We took a walk. We invested in time together. that was on our dime, but we did it. Are there people that are within a certain threshold that you can start as, maybe it's a pilot, maybe it's like, hey, we're doing this to see if we can boost engagement, and you do a quick, not a crazy survey, you know, you don't want the fatigue, but something small. We're trying to experiment with this. How can you help us? But I would say just thinking outside, but like, what are the parameters? And don't think you have to solve the whole problem, but just start with one thing at a time. I hope that helps.
Well, and I don't want to dominate, but of course I can't help but draw upon some of this. It's typically very team based. So we should understand the team as the nucleus for future workplace designs and these sort of behaviors. And so in Future Forum, we do have some tools really at a team level, things like team level agreements for core collaboration hours. So teams saying we're going to not do video for certain portions of time. We're going to try to invest time more in one another. A lot of it has to do with getting more immersive experiences and what you can experience on video. Video is great, but it's tough to hang out. It's tough to eat. Like what Marissa said, it's tough to ask stupid questions, shoot the shit about the weekend. I mean, it's kind of something that ideally does happen at a team leader level. So I wouldn't look to a tech platform as my starting point. I would be trying to find a way of being in communication with team leaders and saying, let's try to find a way of having this space feel like a really critical place for connection. And then I can share with you a couple of episodes from our podcast recently highlighting some of the data around social isolation, burnout, and what is essentially the fragmentation of organizational systems, where a company of 300 might feel like it's actually operating more like 10 to 15 small teams that may or may not actually be fully connected with one another. It's possible to do it fully remotely, but the physical space is a wonderful way of bridging these things. So, like I said, happy to chat more.
Yeah. I think moving around the house is important, and changing scenery as well. And I agree with Sydney as well that for me personally, nothing makes me more productive than feeling motivated. And sometimes not having the adequate workspace can demotivate you. But I've learned, that to enjoy the fruits of my labor and the experience of inner peace, and there's a saying that says governing a large country is like frying a small fish. You spoil it with too much poking, so at the end, if when we have a job, we complain about it. When we don't, it sucks. But if we're, let's just if you try to find what you enjoy around your house, and in terms of technology, I think there's a bunch of different ways to hack and be productive. And
thank you for that, Bernard. I see Elkanah and Danielle also have your hands up for a while. So Elkanah first, and then Danielle, and then we'll do our one-on-one breakout for anyone who can still stay and to meet a new friend in the future work. While Elkanah is going, so please put in the chat your favorite tools for remote work. I actually had a founder in our community reach out and say, we're growing so fast. We have 10 people now, but we're hiring 20 more all over the world, really struggling with exactly what tools, softwares to use for just collaboration, communication. So I told him that, I will gather some of everyone's favorite tools at our event today to get back to him. Elkanah, you say you got 2 insights and an opportunity.
2 insights. I just have been blown away by the level of candor. And I'll tell you why. Because I think there is going to be a major opportunity specifically for furniture to be able to have company. And you can hear my kids in the background. In people's workspaces, especially at wealthy companies like a Google or a Microsoft or even JP Morgan, because you want to make people feel at work, at home. Massive opportunity for MillerKnoll. But then also, at the same time, from a culture building perspective, it's about how you use technology. So for Sydney, whatever you have in terms of video conferencing, figuring out how to create environments like this, like we're experiencing right now in Build the Future of Work, where people can build community and feel connection so they feel invigorated at work. And this is why, like, though my camera is off because I'm still working, I make time to show up here and learn, because these Socratic discussions feed my soul.
Thank you, Aguna. Always loving having you here. Danielle, before I go into breakout.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me the mic. It's great to see some familiar faces. As always, Marissa, hi, Ryan, hi. Like, I just wanted to hop on to say to Sydney, like, you're not alone in all of this. And I hope you don't feel like everything is on you, because, like, it's just as much your responsibility as it is everyone else in the company to contribute to culture. And that's really like what I believe the future of work is all about. It's about like making sure that people know that they also have a say, and that they can really give their input. So like, I think that as long as you try to cultivate that internal community, and help people feel like their opinion really matters and that you are the one that wants to include them on behalf of, sure, the rest of your team. But I think that's important to just like take into account, and just for your mental health sake, you're not alone. And also I'm happy to like help out and hop on a call with you as well. Echoing Ryan, like I know a lot of sort of these small that we work with that are going through the same sort of growing pains. So yeah, here to support you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head here, because for about about 3 months now, I've been feeling very alone on trying to put together some sort of proposal that included everyone's opinions and that kind of suited everyone's needs. But most recently, we've put all this data that we've actually used, Ryan, and we've used some of the things that you've presented, and we presented it to our leaders, and it's kind of in their hands now. But this is so good to hear that others are kind of feeling this and working on it, and it's not just a challenge for us, which I know, but it's like,
it's not. And don't underestimate geography. I know I've been, like, I was in Amsterdam 6 weeks ago. The offices were packed, but most people bike to work or walk to work. Or if you go into small towns in much of the South, they're really busy. But I'm telling you, the best organizations in the world with the most killer workspaces, particularly in North America, are feeling this. You are not alone.
thank you.
And it is rising. It's just rising terribly slowly, because people's patterns of behavior change very slowly. It's why we do ethnographic research. Just because everybody left the office in March of 2020, that was trauma. I mean, that was a terrible thing. People work to reorder their lives for the next 2 years, and to think that they're going to change in anything other than weeks or months, particularly in a situation where the time commitment to get to the office is so substantial, it's just, we need to reset the expectations of leadership. But there are some things that I think can be done. And the message I've been trying to send lately is for those organizations, I was with one today in San Francisco, who are going to experience maybe a little bit longer term return to office. It's a great time to prototype some new approaches to getting people together, some new team level practices, new workplace designs, whatever.
I just want to mention that you're not alone. I mean, I've been in this industry doing something for, I don't know, 18 years, right? And I'm like, I see this article, I see that, I see this research, and sometimes I say, I have no idea what to make of anything some days, but that's when I reach out to people and I say, Ryan, I asked you for data, like, hey, what's this? I reached out to my coworker. What are the occupancy metrics for this? What are you seeing? What does this align? And I think just creating this community of support is important, because if anybody says they have all the answers, I don't think they do. I don't believe them. So how can we have generous, candid discussions? And that's why people like Danielle, like Jing, all of these people showing up and helping each other is amazing. So yeah, I think we're all here for you. This is fun.
Oh, thank you all. This has been amazing. This is what the community is about. We're a digital cluster of future work builders, and I use the word cluster really purposefully, because Wall Street, Hollywood, those classic clusters right? The physical proximity is what made them successful. But we are leaders in a distributed world. So for us to be close, we just have to, like, meet on a more regular basis like this and hear each other out. And what are you seeing? What are you struggling with? And I love seeing this just outpouring of support. So Sydney, I think now you're not alone.